سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم سيدنا أحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم سيدنا حميد صلى الله عليه وسلم.
عن عمر أيضا رضي الله تعالى عنه قال بينما نحن جلوس عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم ذات يوم إذ طلع علينا رجل شديد بياض الثياب شديد سواد شعر لا يرى عليه أثر السفر لا يعرفه منا أحد حتى جلس إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فأسند ركبتيه إلى ركبتيه ووضع كفيه على فخذيه وقال يا محمد أخبرني عن الإسلام. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الإسلام أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت إن استطاع إليه سبيلا. قال صدقت. فعجبنا له يسأله ويصدقه. قال فأخبرني عن الإيمان. قال أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر وتؤمن بالقدر خيره والشر. قال صدقت. قال فأخبرني عن الإحسان. قال أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم يكن تراه فإنه يراك. قال فأخبرني عن الساعة. قال ما المسؤول عنها بأعلم من السائل. قال فأخبرني عن عماراتها. قال أن تلد الأمة ربتها وأن ترى الحفاة العراة العالة رئاء الشاء يتطاولون في البنيان. ثم انطلق فلبثت مليا ثم قال عليه الصلاة والسلام يا عمر أتدري من السائل؟ قلت الله ورسوله أعلم. قال فإنه جبريل أتاكم يعلمكم دينكم. رواه Imam Muslim في صحيحه. This is one of the most profound hadith that we have had from the Messenger of Allah عليه الصلاة والسلام. Let's get into the hadith inshallah. Now, first and foremost, the background to the hadith. Now, as well as verses of Al-Quran Al-Kareem, hadith also have reasons why they came about. Now, this hadith came about according to some, especially Imam Muslim reports. The reason this hadith occurred is because the Prophet ﷺ said, ask me questions, but they were too intimidated to ask him. Then a man came, i.e. this man, and began to ask. Some say the Prophet ﷺ was giving khutbah when this happened. Others say the meaning of khutbah was he was sitting with Sahaba in a halaqah talking when this happened. Now, we're going to begin with there are variants of this hadith, at least 3 of them, and each has got something special in it. Now, we begin with mentioning the wording of the hadith. Sayyidina Umar narrates a hadith again, and he states that we were sitting with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and a man came. And when he mentions the man, he's very descriptive about him. The description that he gives is he has very white clothes, very black hair, and nobody knows him. 3 things. What does that tell you? Number 1, he's not from anywhere that, not only that, they could tell by people's facial features what tribe they were from. This man looked foreign. Number 2, he was young because his hair was black. He was a young man. Number 3, he had not traveled. It's as if he had dropped from the sky. Literally, flown in. Which he had. It's because his clothes had no sign of travel on them. Now there are other points that are often not mentioned. Ibn Hajar has a 30-page commentary to this hadith. I'm going to mention only from Ibn Hajar today. I'm not going to quote anybody else except Ibn Hajar's commentary. First and foremost, there are 2 variants of this hadith. The first is he says, Ya Muhammadu. The second he says, Ya Rasulullah. Now, according to a strong opinion about this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ did not know who this man was when he arrived. I.e., at that moment, Allah did not allow him to know who it was. I'll explain later. That will come later. Now, Al-Qurtubi says, what's the hikmah behind him saying, Ya Muhammad, and what's the hikmah behind him saying, Ya Rasulullah? He states, what happened actually was, when he approached, he said, Ya Rasulullah, and then he said, Ya Muhammad, when he asked the questions. Because when you're introduced to somebody, you use a title first, and then when you know realize who they are, or people realize that you know them, then you use a more intimate title to call them by. So he introduced by mentioning the title of the Prophet ﷺ. Once everybody knew that, oh, this man knows who this is, he began to say, Ya Muhammadu. So that's Qurtubi's tatbiq, how he brings the two hadith together. He brings them together. That first, he said that because there are variant narrations. Ibn Hajar says, the versions I myself have seen, however, show that the only greeting given was an individual greeting, namely, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. Allah knows best. This is before he said, Ya Muhammad, when he arrived. When he arrived. So he definitely said that. Now imagine, Sahaba sitting there, this man arrives, nobody knows him, this young man says, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. They're like, so we're going to get to why. I want to keep it a bit technical here. Now, where we move on to next is the questions that he asked, and I break the questions up, and we're going to go into all the different benefits of this hadith. There's too many benefits to mention. He begins by asking several questions, okay, that are linked. He asks about Islam first, then Iman, then Ihsan. Very, very specific. Okay, very specific. So he says, أخبرني عن الإسلام. The question is, what is Islam? And that's what we're going to talk about first. According to some of the early scholars, they didn't see any difference between Iman and Islam. But according to Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal and the most famous positions, they are two different things. Although they are there's talazum, i.e. one cannot be there without the other. The majority opinion is, and I'm going to summarize because there's too much to talk about here, that Islam is the over testification, and Iman is what's contained within. What's contained within. What's contained within. Now, other than that, I don't want to, there are a lot of things. One of the famous definitions of Iman is تصديق النبي وما جاء به, to believe specifically in the truthfulness of the Prophet ﷺ. Because other religions also believe in God, but they don't believe in the messenger of God. And that's the definition according to the Ash'ari school of Iman. Iman is actually to believe in the messenger of God. That's what differentiates one from the non-Muslims or the other religions, the Abrahamic faith. Now Imam al-Nawawi said the following. He said when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned worship could also mean the and this is a very esoteric spiritual point. He said worship here could mean knowledge of Allah, ma'rifatullah. Now when he said akhbirni anil Islam, he didn't mean tell me about the shahada. He said tell me about how to know God. How to know God. And that the Prophet ﷺ said to him to submit your entire will to Allah Jalla wa Ala, and that's the only way that you will know Him. Ibn Hajar doesn't really agree with this fully, but this was Imam al-Nawawi's position, and as we're talking about al-Nawawi, I think I'm going to go with it for today. Now, another point is that when did this hadith occur? And after this we're going to break, inshallah, just for some, because we have gone 2 hours, and then we're going to come back. How much break do you require? 10, 15 minutes? 15? No more, 10, no more than 10 is fine. The question here at this point is that when he said Islam, the Prophet ﷺ included in Islam the rukn of Hajj, correct? But Hajj was made fard after Fatu Makkah. Correct? After Fatu Makkah. After Makkah was conquered, Hajj was made obligatory then. So when was this hadith? When did it occur? It's a very important question. Some say it occurred 6 months before the Prophet ﷺ left this world. 6 months before he left this world. This is when this happened. Now the questions are, why would it happen then? Some say that it's because all these things had been complete. And Jibreel came then, this man is Jibreel, of course, if you haven't guessed it, to ask about those things, to show a method and certain things of how the deen is to be propagated, which we're going to get to. But it's definite that this hadith occurred very late. Some say after the entire Quran had been revealed. This hadith occurred. After the break, we're going to talk more about Iman, the latter signs, and especially the signs of the Day of Judgment, and some other things related to the benefits and what's to be extracted from this. The next point, or the next thing he asks is, أخبرني عن الإحسان. Tell me about ihsan. The word ihsan in Arabic means to beautify something. Ahsana yuhsin, ihsan comes from husn. Husn means beauty. And ahsana is a transitive verb. It means to beautify something else. So ihsan is the action of beautifying something. So what he's asking about there is how to beautify oneself after believing, submitting and believing essentially. The question is, why would he even ask that? It shows that tasawwuf, spirituality, tazkiyatun nafs, cleaning the lower self, is an obligation. After accepting Islam and believing in Allah Jalla wa Ala and all the things that I mentioned about prophets, etc., then one must endeavor to beautify the inner soul. That's an obligation. That's why it comes third, immediately after Iman. So he asks about ihsan, and the Prophet ﷺ says to him that to worship your Lord as if you see him, كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّكَ يَرَاكَ, even though you see him not, as he only sees you. Now there's a variation of this hadith at this point, that it goes further by saying in the variation and you must know that you cannot see your Lord until you die. That's Abu Umama's addition of the narration. Now something very important here, that so he says, Abu Umama says that then the Prophet ﷺ said, and you must know that you cannot see him in this world until you die. Now in this life or the hereafter, in terms of the sight or vision of the beatific vision of Allah Jalla wa Ala, what's our understanding of it? Because this is a theological issue, it's an aqidah issue directly. The position of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah is that one will be gifted who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. Mainly what their opinion is in Jannah, essentially, when they even use the word Day of Judgment. Because according to many, the vision is not on the Day of Judgment, it's in Al-Jannah. It's in Al-Jannah. Although Allah's countenance and great attributes will manifest on that day, that you will see Allah Jalla wa Ala. But what's amazing is they say you will not see Allah in any modality. Bila kayf. Nobody knows what this sight is, what this vision is, because you can't comprehend it whatsoever. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ never allowed people to essentially delve into this great vision. وَإِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ نَاظِرًا, they are looking at their Lord. And the greatest punishment to the people who disbelieved in God is that they will not see their Lord. Now in the earth, I'm going to go back to that point in a second. In the earth, it's also possible to have a vision of Allah in your dream. Now what you will see in your dream is an imaginary interpretation, but it's not to say, according to Ahl Sunnah, Abu Hasan Ash'ari said, it does not mean that that's not your Lord communicating with you. That your Lord can communicate with you in a dream, according to Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Even you can see a vision of something and it be your Lord. It's not really your Lord, it's an imaginary vision. And in fact the Prophet ﷺ himself declared this in the hadith narrated by Imam Tirmidhi, رَأَيْتُ رَبِّي فِي أَحْسَنِ الصُّورَةِ, I saw my Lord in the best form. Meaning the Lord doesn't take a form. So he saw him in a dream, he means. Now that isn't the form of your Lord. Your Lord has no form. But that doesn't mean it's not communication by the Almighty. However, it's very dangerous because shaitan can also take that form. The only person that shaitan cannot imitate is the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you see me, فَقَدْ رَآنِي فَإِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَا يَتَمَثَّلُ بِهِ. If you see me, truly you have seen me, for shaitan cannot take my form. In another variation, you have seen truth. In another narration, مَنْ رَآنِي فِي الْمَنَامِ سَيَّرَانِ يَقْدَةً. He who sees me in his sleep will most certainly see me when he is awake. It's a sound hadith narrated by Imam Bukhari. What's beautiful about that hadith is, some said that means on the Day of Judgment. You're going to see the Prophet on the Day of Judgment. Subki said there is nothing special based on that of seeing the Messenger of Allah on the Day of Judgment, because even the kuffar will see the Messenger of Allah on the Day of Judgment. They petition him, beg to intercede on their behalf. He said it befits only a mu'min to see the Prophet in a wakeful state in this world, and that gift be achieved. So he said at the minimum, before you die, you will get the vision when you're awake of the Prophet ﷺ, if you've seen him in your dream as a condition. Said Muhammad ibn Ali al-Maliki also says exactly the same thing. Anybody who has seen the Messenger of Allah in their dream, alayhi salatu wasalam, in a wakeful state, is a promise that the Prophet ﷺ has made to them. Sayyarani yaqdatan, in a wakeful state. Yeah. So as for the akhirah, just a point on the beatific vision, the akhirah is very beautiful. Mullah al-Qari mentioned something which I want to say. Mullah al-Qari says that in Jannah, people enter Jannah. Inshallah, we all enter Jannah. And they, without questioning. If questioning, a very light questioning. And if it's a heavy questioning, a questioning that still ends in success. So they enter Al-Jannah and they go to Jannah and they're shown to their quarters, like your rooms here. There won't be rooms like this, but much better. So you're shown to your quarters, your palace, and your continent, your country, whatever you may have. And then Mullah Ali Qari says there's a herald who calls to a gathering, an ijtima', an ihtifal. And the people don't know what he's calling to. And they all gather, and the angel says to them, today your Lord is going to fulfill his promise that you will see your Lord finally. And they get to see, the ummah the believers get to see Allah Jalla wa'ala. And Mullah Ali Qari says in fascinating terms, he says that vision, you see Allah, but then it's only for a certain period of time, after which he said that will return as an Eid every year. According to Mullah Ali Qari, one position of the ulama, the vision of thy Lord will be every year. So people say, when I get bored in Jannah, not if you're looking forward to the vision of Allah Jalla wa'ala. Which Mullah Ali Qari, that's how he justifies it. And he says at the end that, they say to their Lord, oh Ya Allah, if you had only shown us yourself before, we would not have wanted any of this. Meaning Al-Jannah. And that was the exact point that Jannah was given first. Because if you saw your Lord first, then you wouldn't want anything else. So that's something very, very important in Al-Jannah. That then it's an actual Eid. It comes back every year, and he differs on how often it comes back. He also differs on who sees it. Now, after the third question, ihsan, to beautify, and essentially Nawawi mentions something really beautiful about that, and he says the following. He says that its meaning is that you would observe the aforementioned manners only when you see Allah and He sees you, not because you see Him, but because He sees you, and He always sees you. Therefore, excel in your worship of Him, even if you do not see Him. The gist of the narration, therefore, is that even if you do not see Allah, persevere in excellent worship because He is seeing you. Bishr al-Hafi didn't sleep for many years, and then he fell asleep and he had a vision of Allah Jalla wa'ala. And he said, Ya Allah, I've been calling you for 7 or 8 years. Allah said, I know. He said, why haven't you replied to my call? I've been calling you every night. I've withdrawn, no sleep, no food, waiting for your reply. And Allah says to Bishr al-Hafi, Ya Bishr, did you not think that I love the sound of your voice? And Rumi says that, he talks about birds, he says people, they trap nightingales to sing, they love their voice. They don't let it out, it's trapped. He said nobody traps a crow, meaning nobody wants to listen to a crow. And this is a very important point about Allah giving, testing people's patience with return, basically, with return. That Allah will make us wait, and it's in the wait that the opening is given to people. In the wait, the opening is given to people, not in the immediate result that we seek, but it's in the patience that great openings and great things are given, like in Fathu Makkah, for instance, and Umrah the year before. If you don't know it, they went on Umrah before, and they were stopped a few years before, and the Quraysh said, "You're not coming in." Surah Al-Mumtahina was revealed because of it, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "Okay." Umar was there, radhiyallahu anhu. Umar said, "We're going to fight them now. Let us fight them." The Prophet ﷺ said, "No." He said, "What are your conditions?" And they made conditions. They said, "If one of yours comes to us, we keep him. If one of ours comes to you as a convert, you give him back." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Fine." Every condition, and said, Umar said, "Ya Rasulullah, they give you conditions, you accept, and you give no conditions of your own." He said, "Umar, just be patient." What happened? They broke the treaty, and the Muslims walked into Mecca without shedding any blood and took it over. And that's when Allah revealed, indeed, we have opened a great opening for you in Al-Quran Al-Kareem. And this was the patience of the Prophet ﷺ for that. Now, we move on to the next part. And before that, just 2 points I want to mention. They say that in one narration that when this man came into the gathering, he literally was moving people out of the way, stepping over them. And they were like, literally like that. And why would you do that? And they were getting angry. They were not only getting angry, it's narrated by Umar ibn Qa'qa''s narration that the Sahaba were saying to themselves, who does he think he is? He asks the messenger of God and then says, yeah, that's true. Does he think he knows more than him? That's exactly what they were saying. He thinks he knows more than the messenger of God. They were getting angry, like really angry with him. Like, who's this man? We don't know him. coming to our gathering, and he thinks he knows more than the Messenger of God. Every time the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam says something, he says sadaqt, you say that's right. Why would you ask a question if you know the answer? And they were getting upset with it. He comes in first, he just walks over us, then he starts asking because they don't know who it is, you see. So one of the great hikmahs that Ibn Hajar states is this was to teach people that when people come to you, they don't all know the etiquettes of asking, and that Allah was preparing them for Bedouins and people coming to them that will ask them in a coarse manner, how to deal with them, that be patient. Look how the Prophet ﷺ is dealing with him. One of the amazing things is how he sat, which I did mention earlier. There are 3 narrations regarding this, that he joined his knees with the knees of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, according to the famous narration Imam Muslim, he placed his hands on the lap of the Prophet ﷺ. Both his hands on the lap. In another narration on his own, but it's very famous that he placed his hands on the lap of the Prophet ﷺ. And Ibn Hajar mentions that as a sound position. Others say no. They say because he came as a student, and it doesn't befit a student to place his hands on the lap of the teacher. You see? So he placed it on his own lap, and he connected his knees sitting in front, waiting for essentially the knowledge. So it doesn't befit. Now, before we move on to the benefits, we move on to the next question. This is a very important question. He asked about the hour, Mata Sa'a. Now, why is he asking about the question? The question about the hour. It's because after Islam, Iman, and perfecting your deen, the most important topic is the Day of Judgment and the signs of the Day of Judgment. It is the most, people say, oh, everybody's talking about the signs of the Day of Judgment. Well, good, because we should. You see, the Prophet ﷺ exhorted us to remember what's happened. We should know every single sign. We should see them in front of us. And one of the great, I would say, one of the things that we neglect the most is seeing signs in our daily life. I see signs every day. You have to wake up and you find another one. Oh, there goes. We were waiting for that to be fulfilled. Well, we're in bigger trouble now, aren't we? That one's complete. I mean, shockingly accurate. Because you don't expect it to just manifest in front of your face. Just to manifest recently, I saw particular signs. I was just absolutely blown away. They were that clear, and you know many of them already. I mean, leave it on mobile phones, or a son will talk to his father from the other side of the world, or from the strap on his hip, or from his shoe, or that people wear drums on their head and they'll dance. All of these other types of signs which are clear, headphones and the rest of it, beats. They even look like drums now, Dr. Ray. So I mean, it's incredible that how accurate each sign was. The hadith about diseases that come with different types of actions. So he said, when is the hour? And the Prophet ﷺ said, Mal mas'ulu anha bi'a'la min as-sa'il. He said, the one asking knows as much as the one who is questioned. Now, the famous opinion of this hadith, according to Imam al-Qurtubi, is that not Jibreel or the Prophet ﷺ knew when the hour was. This is the position of Imam al-Qurtubi. Imam al-Qurtubi was the greatest mufassir of Quran ever. This is also the position of Ibn Hajar, it seems, as well, Asqalani. This is also the position, it seems, of Munawi, Mundhari, a lot of the other muhaddithin as well. I think Zakaria Ansari also. However, there are other positions. Taftazani states no. He states both of them no. But there's no benefit to tell the people. Allah knows best. Ibrahim al-Bajuri says that he didn't know at this point, but just before Allah took him to the heavens, he told him when it was. But Fakhruddin and others say it doesn't matter. What does it matter? He told you it was on a Friday. He told you it'd be Asr time. What do you need to know? He said the reason it's not. He said it's just not important. It's just not important that he has to know it. He said it's not a point of dispute. Like Al-Barzanji, who we quote in As-Sanad, said he didn't know because in the Quran Allah talks about the 5 things that only Allah knows, and it's one of them. And he said because it's not. It doesn't need to be known. You see, it's not one of those things that. And this is amazing. Taftazani says him not knowing doesn't lower his rank. He said him not knowing raises his rank, even what Qurtubi says. You see, because it's nothing to do with that. You see. So some of them, even Taftazani mentions that when he was asked about it, it's to say that when you're not given knowledge of a thing that you don't know, And some say in that way that the one who's asking knows about as much as the one who is questioned. The khulasa of it is a non-issue. People debate about this issue. Did the Prophet ﷺ know the Day of Judgment? In Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, there's a difference of opinion. Complete middle, not even down the middle, towards one side more on Qurtubi's position. But I don't know why people talk about this. It doesn't matter. People fight and argue over it. I don't think we have any right to talk about the knowledge of the Anbiya and the Prophets. We don't know what Allah gave them, and we couldn't even fathom the amount of knowledge that was given to the Prophets of Allah. It's just overwhelming. Bayezid Bistami he said, I reached the level of the past the awliya, the arifin, and I saw the Prophet ﷺ and I nearly burnt. He said, we can't look further than that. So we leave that. Now, one of the great things that Ibn Hajar says is the reason the Prophet ﷺ said it, Ibn Hajar Asqalani says, is because they kept asking about it, the Sahaba, and Allah put a stop to it. They kept asking, Mata sa'a ya Rasulullah. You know the hadith of Bukhari, what have you prepared for it? وَمَا عَدَّدْتَ لَهُ يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ السَّاعِ إِيَّانَ مُرْسَاهَا. So in the Quran as well, Allah saying, and Allah put a stop to it. Like, tell them, that's it. And this was the final time anybody asked about the hour. Because Jibreel said, well, I don't want to know when it is actually. What are its signs? And then the Prophet said, okay, this is what you need to look for. Now we get into the last portion of this hadith. He gives alayhi salatu wasalam 2 signs. The first sign he gives, وَأَن تَلِدَ الْأَمَةُ رَبَّتَهَا, that the slave girl gives birth to a master. Ibn Hajar mentions 4 things. What's incredible is that this is what I'm saying here. The early ulama did not have the insight into this hadith as the people do now. I'll tell you why. Because we're living it. That's the difference. They were living it at that time. They were like, oh, it may mean this, because they couldn't see. Like women wearing clothes as if it were their second skin. They couldn't see. They said, what does this mean? And they didn't know. They couldn't see in their, the Victorians would cover the legs of tables because they were called legs. So they couldn't see at all. So they would just say, we don't know what this means. Allahu a'lam. And this is a sign of the dead. We've seen it. We've seen it manifest itself. People committing fornication publicly, we've seen it, happen in this era. So the early meaning of this hadith was that a man would take a slave girl and he would have relations with her. And she will give birth to a child. Okay? She would give birth to a child. Now, she's still a slave girl, but that child is free because his father is the slave master. Eventually making that child the Rabb, the Lord of his own mother. That's one opinion. Ibn Hajar kind of says no. Another opinion is that a man will have relations with a slave girl. She will give birth to a child. She will then be sold and sold and sold till one day her son grows up and buys her not knowing it's his mother. Ibn Hajar says, I don't take that neither. Because we see it now happening right now. Then he gives another similar position for 3, but the 4th position that he gives is astonishing. 4th position is astonishing. Like when I read it, I thought, wow, that is like he says next, it means that there will be much filial impiety. Uquq al-awlad. He said children will be born who rebel against their parents, and the parents will become their slaves. Now that was not seen in the time of the Sahaba, the Salaf, the Khalaf. It was unknown. It was just unknown. He states, and a son will treat his mother the way a master treats his slave, demanding her through insults, blows and servitude. Hence he is called her Lord metaphorically, or if master, Rabb, here means tutor, Murabbi, then literally. The latter is the soundest explanation in my opinion. This is Ibn Hajar in the 9th century saying this is the meaning to the hadith. He says because we can't see. Now you tell me if that hasn't come true. If it hasn't come true, and if that isn't one of the greatest interpretations of this hadith, and talidu amatu rabbataha, she becomes his slave. And later we're going to talk about huququl walidain. The next hadith, it does not even need interpretation. The Bedouin, barefooted, destitute, competes in building tall buildings. Go and look at pictures of Dubai just 40 years ago. Yeah. Now, I'm not going to even comment on that. It's so clear that it is لا يحتاج إلى البحث يعني. It doesn't need a discussion. Okay. Now I'm going to mention some other beneficial points, and then I'm going to just talk a bit about the Day of Judgment. And Nawawi said, that from this reply it can be inferred that when a scholar is asked about what he does not know, he declares that he does not know it without detracting from his rank. On the contrary, such an answer shows his God-fearing scrupulousness. My teacher, may Allah raise his rank, Shaykh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, he said to me in one of the permissions, he wrote in there that he said, part of the permission given to anybody is that if you're asked and you know not, say I don't know, for indeed it is half of knowledge. فَإِنَّهُ نِصْفُ الْعِلْمِ. And it's that's more important than anything. He said to us, if you have one iota of doubt, say I don't know. He said, just say I don't know. Even if you know meaning, and there's that one, it's like I'm pretty certain, check it. So check it and then give your answer. He said, because you will regret it. And that raises a person's rank. You see, now we have people, Allah musta'an, who have an answer to every question. They have entire television shows. They never say, I don't know. It's like, of course, we've got the answer for that, and we've got the answer for that. And the Bedouin came to Imam Malik and said, Ya Imam, he had 40 questions. Every single question, Imam Malik said, La adri, I don't know. He answered about 7 or 8. He said, what am I to tell the people? He says, tell them, akhbirhum, qala Malik, la adri. Malik said, he doesn't know, what you want me to do? Make it up. I just don't know. Now, and Malik was a man who memorized more than 1 million hadith. I'm not talking about with their Bukhari page number. I'm talking with the people in the chain, their life stories and the life stories of the people they narrate from. Memorized. And he just said, Allahu A'lam. I don't know. We'll see. Inshallah, we'll ask somebody more knowledgeable. Inshallah. Now, another point. Al-Qurtubi said the purpose of this question is to stop the listeners from the Day of Judgment asking about it. They had asked about it a great deal, as shown in many verses and hadith. When the answer was obtained in its aforementioned form, they finally despaired of knowing it. The previous questions, on the other hand, were intended to elicit answers for the listeners to learn and act upon. Those answers highlighted the distinction, what can be known and what cannot. Now, next point. This is amazing. There is a riwayah that states that Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam asked Jibreel the same question. He said, Mata sa'a? And they say Jibreel's wings shuddered. And he gave exactly the same reply. He said, Mal mas'ulu anha bi'ala min as-sa'il. Mal mas'ulu anha min as-sa'il. Yeah, that Isa alayhi salam asked him. And this is narrated by Sufyan, narrated to us, Malik ibn Meghwa narrated. So it's narrated in Ibn Mubarak in Kitab al-Zuhud. So, this is an age-old question, you see. So maybe that's when the wording was taken from. Allah knows best. Now, in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, shall I inform you of the preconditions of the Day of Judgment? So he added that. Now I'm going to finish this hadith off to move to the next hadith. We have an hour and a half. And then this man went, and I want to mention one point here, a few points. This hadith is all about seeking knowledge, wearing clean clothes, the beard being immaculate, because they thought he was immaculate, you see. And not just that, it was an inference to the study of knowledge should begin young, because he was young, not that if you're old. Sadi studied when he was older, Abu Hanifa when he was slightly older. That you do it when you're young. How the teacher should bear patience. How the teacher should bear patience regardless of what the student is asking. How those in the circle should never interrupt the one who is asking if the teacher does not interject. Do you see that very important point? They never spoke. And the Prophet said they never dared speak, you see. The Messenger of Allah is listening. How when a person is asking, you let him finish his question and then you reply. And then when he is replying, that you, the questioner, waits until he finishes his answer. All of these very, very important things. Very important things. Now, he disappears. And by the way, he disappears. There are various narrations. One narration, he got up and they ran after. The Prophet said, go get him. Bring him back. And they said, they looked, some say, for 6 or 7 hours they couldn't find him. They say Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh was with them, but then he went home. And he met the Prophet after 3 days according to the Sanad's position. That this next part of the hadith takes place 3 days later. And he said, when he said, Labithtu maliyan, time passed. that it means 3 days according to the scientist position. And he says, Ya Amr, do you know who the man was? He said, Ya Allahu wa Rasuluhu a'lam. I don't know. Allah and His Messenger know best. He said it was Jibreel and he came to teach you your religion. Now, Ibn Hajar says Allah had never sent Jibreel in this form because He did not want the Prophet ﷺ to know who the person was. So Ibn Hajar says at that point. And then right at the end, the Prophet ﷺ, Allah gave him the knowledge for a reason. We don't know the divine wisdoms of what happened there. Allah knows best. And we just leave it. Ibn Hajar kind of leaves it. He says, we don't know, but there's some divine secrets being handed out there to the Prophet ﷺ. We don't know what they are. Exactly. And he has 3 or 4 pages on it. To finish, third, Qurtubi said, this hadith is fit to be called the mother of the Sunnah in the light of all guidelines in the knowledge of the Sunnah it contains. At-Tibi said, this is the wisdom behind the fact that Al-Baghawi began Al-Masabih As-Sunnah and Sharh As-Sunnah with this hadith, following the lead of the Quran, which began with the Fatiha, since the latter contains the generality of the teachings of Quran. Qadi Iyad said, this hadith contains all the outward and inward duties of profession of faith, its inception, its state, its ultimate point, as well as the works of the limbs, sincerity, inward disposition, how to guard oneself from defective deeds. Even the sciences of law as a whole all go back to that hadith and are supplied by it. And Ibn Hajar finishes, this is why I discussed this hadith at great length. And yet, even if what I mention is abundant, it is still little in relation to what the hadith contains. So I do not forsake concision. Allah is the grantor of success. And that's the end of Ibn Hajar's commentary. And I purposely only chose to comment Ibn Hajar because I find nothing as complicated and as long as Ibn Hajar's bahaf. But it was the best, basically. Now we move on to the next hadith, inshallah.